This guy is nuts. Is he really making daily recordings of his possible divorce and releasing it as a podcast? They both cheated on each other. She's making six figures and still doesn't contribute to any joint endeavors financially. Why is she still with him? Why is he still with her? I can't wait for the next episode. This helped me be a better wife. So this is how men think. I hate my husband less now. I understand my wife more now. These are some of the listener comments to the Divorce Diaries podcast. All over the map, I know. These anonymous accounts of events should resonate with anyone that has been married, is married, or is preparing for marriage and helps couples avoid pitfalls as they might prepare for marriage. Entire seasons are released on Patreon weeks before anywhere else at Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Link in description. Now for today's episode.
I realize that I am far more emotional than I wanted to let on or admit. And I think this likely could apply to just about everyone. I like to fashion myself as a very logical and reasonable person. And I think for the most part I am. But when I am affected significantly by something that causes such an intense reaction inside of me, I will say and do things that I would not regularly say and do. I recorded a podcast probably over a year ago, Divorce Diaries, where I talked about what is still now my sister-in-law. And I said that my opening line of the podcast was, "She's despicable." And hearing myself say that today, like I listened to it, and I couldn't continue to listen to my words because of how toxic they were. And that podcast is not public anymore. It won't be. But that podcast was one of the principal reasons that I stopped recording the Divorce Diaries in that fashion. I would record the diary entries right after something happened in my life. I'd grab the recorder. I'd talk about, oh my gosh, something my wife did and how it made me feel, how I felt disrespected. And I guess what was happening was my disrespect cup, in my view, was runneth over. And the overflow of the emotion was pouring out into those podcasts that I was recording. And I don't for a minute think that my current sister-in-law is a bad person. I don't think she's bad. I don't think she's despicable. I don't think she's dark. But I said that she was. In fact, there was something else I did with one of my kids. I guess I was so upset and taken aback at the side I felt my child was taking against me and the position and stance that they were taking, that I badmouthed and disparaged one of my children to the other. And I didn't even know that I was doing it at the time. And it was only when one of my children told me what I told them about the other child that everything snapped into focus. And I remembered that I did say exactly what that kid just reminded me I said. And it was so toxic and weird that as I said, I fashioned myself as reasonable, measured, calculated. And I am not. I am sometimes emotional, weak, irrational, I throw temper tantrums. I complain. I cry. I whine. And I'm sometimes flawed beyond measure. And worse, you can actually very clearly measure my flaws, of which I have many. So I wonder, what were all of the things that I did over the course of my marriage that were, what did I say and do along the way that wasn't right? What did I say and do along the way that made things worse? What did I say and do along the way that I don't even remember saying I did, but it left a lasting impression on my wife or my children, myself? What did I do? I don't know. I've forgiven myself, but I know I've done a lot of things that weren't good, probably, because I didn't even remember until I listened to that podcast episode where I ended up in that podcast episode, if memory serves, I ended up praising my sister-in-law. It was a sort of a clickbaity title, a little bit. It was something like, you know, even bad people give you good advice, or even a despicable person I don't really know what it was, but I remember my opening line was, my sister-in-law is despicable, but I went on to praise her for the statements that she's made that have helped me, or the statement that she made over the years that helped me, which was when I was talking to her about certain things that were happening in my life, she would say, you can only control what you can control. And it was like she was just always trying to talk me off of the emotional ledge I was on. She's just would repeat, you can only control what you can control, until I guess it left such an imprint on me that I recorded that podcast episode. But I guess I was just so upset and hurt and embroiled in my emotions and how I was feeling that I just dumped my anger, maybe that was I had toward my wife, or maybe my parents, or other situations and circumstances and people in my life. And I just, she's despicable because she's done one or two things that I may or may not, quote unquote, approve of from my high horse position that I must have felt that I was at. I was a bit sanctimonious. Like, honestly, where do I get off calling someone else despicable? And hearing me say those words, it was just so... It was a glimpse into how toxic I can be. And I'm not necessarily recording this Divorce Diaries entry to talk about how much of a shitty person I am. I'm trying to acknowledge the shitty behavior that I can have at times. I'd like anybody that's listening to take a step back and look at yourself and say, have I sort of behaved badly? Do I have as good a grasp on myself as I hope, as I think I should, as I'd like to? Or are you just like me? Sometimes you're good, sometimes you're not so good. Sometimes you're flat out bad. Sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes you're right. What are you? And I guess I just strive to, hopefully, one day I can go day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, living a life that I'm sort of proud of, saying things out of my mouth that I'm proud of, that I don't go back and look at and say, damn it, how much damage did I cause with those words? I don't know. It's a little bit of self-reflection, and I think going into therapy to help process, help gauge, help fix things is the way to go. We are all works in progress.
Wow! That was the Divorce Diaries podcast. The Daily Saga will continue tomorrow. The full season's episodes are on Patreon now. Subscribe for early access. Click the Patreon link in the description. Hopefully, these entries help our anonymous recorder as a form of his own personal therapy. That's his hope and his intention. Will these recordings of life's curveballs lead this family to the best resolution in the end? We'll keep listening. New episodes are released daily on all podcast players, but all episodes are available on Patreon at Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Until next time.